Hello, 13 of you. Welcome to Thursday. It is currently 4 p.m. in New York City, and we are going to cook some rice and lentils. I don't think I've really cooked this week yet, so we're gonna cook some of our farmer's market kale. It's been washed. We're gonna use some of our onions that's been here for over a week, and garlic and ginger. We're gonna use up some of our chicken stock that's been defrosting from the freezer. It's time. It's been a couple of weeks that it's spent in the freezer. So we're just gonna make some rice and lentils with chicken stock and vegetables, a little bit of carrots that I bought too, and we're just gonna hang. KK. As you know, I'm going through a very emotionally turbulent time. Who isn't? So, be prepared. Some tears might just leak out, but I think mentally I am feeling the stabilization coming on. I wouldn't say I'm mentally stable yet, but knowing myself, I think it's gonna be maybe 2.5, 3 more weeks before I kind of level out with my learning cycle this round of life, and hopefully in 3 weeks I'll start not crying every day, which I'm still crying, but it's still very exciting to develop new techniques if we want to call it that, to employ while crying. And for example, today I was crying, and my apartment has a lot of mirrors, and I live alone, so no one passed away, just me, just dead old me passing away, and a new me hopefully emerging, somewhat reincarnated. No one close to me passed away. Obviously a lot of people have passed away, but I was staring in the mirror while I was crying. And sometimes I cry in a sobby way that my mouth kind of just opens and widens a little bit. And I thought all of a sudden that research, the scientific research of, how you can trick your brain into thinking that you're happy by smiling, by just physically smiling like this. You can trick your brain into thinking that you're happy when you're actually not. So I was crying and I was staring in the mirror, and I said, my mouth is already working in that direction. What if I just exaggerated a little bit and made it into a smiling sob? And I thought it would be a very interesting experiment to see if, I think ever since college, I've been trying to make a personal brand of sorts out of embracing sadness, because when I was feeling very depressed, people would often say to me, why are you so down? Just be happy. The stuff that people do. And I grew very reactive. And I was just stomping my foot down, and I was like, why should I be happy? Why is everybody telling me to be happy? Clearly there's something so monopolizing and oppressive about this narrative that I should just be happy, and happy is the right thing to do, right? So that was when I was 17, 18, 19, 20. Now that I'm 34, half of a lifetime later, it suddenly occurred to me today that instead of just making a personal brand out of, cherishing sadness in the face of this monopoly of happiness, my conspiracy theory is this reaching for happiness is a part of capitalism, but let's just put that on the back burner and parking lot it. But today I was like, what if I make the act of crying, even when it's not about a joyful subject matter, even when it's not triggered by a happy emotion, what if I make the act of crying married into the sensation of happiness? And obviously happiness is not just smiling and laughing. There's more to happiness than just the superficial parts. But I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting to make an experiment out of how would I make myself feel if I started with a sad feeling that expelled itself in sobbing cries, and I channeled some sort of artificial, superficial, physical expression that's normally associated with joy into this expression of sadness. Like alchemy, chemistry, whatever you want to call it. I was basically cooking emotions. I was trying to see what would happen if I cooked mush with my emotions. So like Sad Boy says, IDK June, I was depressed and was told to just smile and it cured me. Hi Siobhan. I always love it when people are just like, I'm sneaking in, listening from work. It delights me to no end. Fuck capitalism in all the ways that we can. Small, medium, and big. And also arson, but not arson, but also arson. But yeah, that was my experiment of the day. How would I feel, you know, incorporating a little bit of happy accent into sadness? What if I started to grow less reactive from, you know, the kind of rebellion and resistance in my college years into this harmonization in my 30s of what if there is no binary of happy and sad? How can I incorporate body, mind, and soul into pushing the spectrum into a community of sorts, rather than two sects of happiness and sadness existing at polarized ends? What if I use this as a way to erase this camp of happy versus sad? What would I feel like if I no longer associated the act of crying with just this negative, sort of depressive state of being of mourning and grief, and instead learned that the act of grieving itself entails, already necessitates this experience of happiness that no longer exists in its original form, and that the grief is simply a way of memorializing that previous state of happiness that has now sort of faded. And how do we find joy at this funeral of the past in remembering it? And yeah, I would say it is like a bittersweet feeling, for sure. But I was trying to not just like cerebralize it, because lately everything from therapy to friend therapy to Instagram memes to YouTube videos have been telling me that thinking too much is a coping and defensive mechanism, that it actually brings harm to me because it's only incorporating one aspect of my lived experience, and I'm relying on my reality through just the mind, and I've been neglecting my other data input channels in a way. I have some notes to share with my friend Daisuke offered to talk with me for like close to 2 hours on his experience living as an autistic individual, and giving me some really truly valuable advice about the way to think about the world and the way to understand everyone who's autistic and not autistic, and you know, relate some of his own experiences. And I thought it was truly like on point therapy for me. A lot of things that he said dovetailed beautifully with my actual therapist's advice, which I floated the idea to my therapist that could I have OCD and could I have autism, and he was like, no, I don't think so, you're not displaying symptoms. But I've also only had like maybe 15-16 sessions with this guy over a year and a half, maybe 2 years, but you know, like, I'm thinking about it. I'm learning about a lot of things. Okay, on to onions. Okay, 1 pot for rice and 1 pot for lentils. And I will be reading your comments once I pop it out. And let's cook. Monthly sessions are actually pretty good for me. I've discovered that it's the sweet spot for me because, unfortunately, maybe it's like my perfectionistic tendencies or whatever. I feel almost like a kid I used to take piano lessons as a kid, and it used to make me feel so self-conscious when I know I didn't practice enough that week and I was forced to go back to my teacher and like present her with my progress, and I would never feel like I progressed enough, and it would always make me feel like a delinquent. And so I kind of feel the same thing with therapy, where if I go back too soon, like a week or even 2 weeks, I feel like I haven't really progressed at all or incorporated change into my life to like really report back with anything different. And so I just feel like my wheels are spinning in place. And obviously therapy is financially an expenditure. So for me, the sweet spot is definitely just monthly sessions. And I found this therapist after my mom passed away. So let's do some math here. It was probably November or December that I started shopping around for therapists of 2021. And so let's just say we started in January 2022. Yeah, so it's been 2 years, basically, since I've known this therapist. So it might be actually a little bit more than the amount of sessions I've said I have with him. But yeah, we only have, at most, monthly sessions. It's been working well for me, I think. But obviously everyone needs different care and treatment and routines, so do what works for you. Yeah, unlimited therapy sessions, I would be using the shit out of that. I need health insurance. So I guess if I ever change my job, that will be the motivating factor. And who knows? Maybe I'll find someone who wants to marry me and give me health insurance. For my 2 pots, I will use the chicken fat in our chicken broth up top here to help us saute our veggies. Probably should have skimmed the fat before the broth melted, and now it's gonna splatter. C'est la vie. Sometimes you do everything right, and sometimes you don't. Most times you don't. That's okay. I'll just give these onions a quick chop and drop them in there. I'm gonna have onions in both my rice and my lentils. What do you guys do when you feel really dumb? Like, what do you feel is the cure for residual embarrassment of real life behaviors that you look back and you're like, I don't know if I would have done that again? Do you just try to forget it, or do you do something else to kind of internalize the learnings? I'm going to add garlic to this, but I'm also going to add some garlic powder to this because this is a discontinued burlap and barrel spice. It's porcelain garlic, and we just happen to have a few of these left over at the warehouse, and they were asking everyone who wanted what, and I got some of this, so we're going to use some of it. It smells so potent. So I'm just using a fork. LOL. You just have to be able to laugh at yourself. Everyone has those moments. True. Denial, straight up amnesia. Sighing and trying my best to move on from it, hoping I've learned. Oh my gosh. I'll either remind myself that I was young, I'll try to ruminate on stuff, because I'll ruminate on stuff from when I was like 5 and just feel the shame or let it wash over me and pass. Yeah. I do that too. I work through it with my therapist, otherwise I internalize everything and blame myself. Ignore it. I've actively been not looking at stuff in the past and only focusing on the present and future. Separate entirely from younger me, bless her heart. Internally cringe every time it pops into my head, then remind myself it never has to happen that way again. Depends on just how dumb I was. Mostly I let myself laugh because I'm never mean-spirited, so it must have been lack of experience. Love all of these. Thank you all for sharing. I recently asked on my Instagram how people feel about if your partner could develop this ability to lucid dream, and they chose to lucid dream every night about having sex with their ex, how people would feel. And the responses that came through from that quiz, or poll rather, were fascinating. Just the different boundaries and interpretations and opinions that people had on that matter, and whether or not that was like violating, was truly so diverse. Like, everybody had a different idea of what was acceptable and what wasn't. So I just keep learning from all of you. And it makes me feel truly so much more free. It feels like when I did my first shroom experience and I had this realization that, hey, maybe we're all dolls in a dollhouse and nobody really is responsible for their choices, and that free will was so limited, and that, you know, there might just be someone else moving us about from way up high. And I think every time I see different people's perspectives, it broadens my own mind in such a way that it frees me, it liberates me from the prison of my own perspective. And I'm still kind of thinking about that comment that we talked about on the last live. You know, the comment that told me that I shouldn't be constantly looking for a boyfriend because I don't need it, I just need platonic friends. And I think that's part of the draw of going on dating apps and meeting new people too, is just how will they broaden my own view of the world? How will they change me? How will they help me become evolutionary? And I love learning together, honestly. A lot of people say that the dumb shit that I do help y'all think, and I think y'all help me think, so it's mutual. This is mutual aid. My channel is mutual aid, and I am the biggest benefactor. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm constantly looking for a boyfriend, but I will say that I think I constantly look for companionship in all the forms that it presents itself. Who knows, maybe I'll look for something else after my 2 to 3 weeks are over and my horizons have been fully expanded. Just waiting. Just waiting. Gonna turn that off and maybe turn this off to low because they're burning. Smells amazing, by the way. Oh my gosh, the Pineapple Pen song. That was from so long ago, wasn't it? When was that from? Throwback. It's hard. Change is hard. Change takes time. I'm impatient. It sucks. It hurts. Makes me feel out of control. And I can be somewhat of a control freak. So, yeah. It can be a painful process. Just 7 years old? I feel like that Pineapple Pen song was way older than 7. Really? Interesting. Okay, we're going to turn that one off. And we're going to turn this one on. recap for those joining late, I'm making rice, I'm making lentils, I'm using up some greens, I'm using up frozen chicken stock that I made a while ago. I am thinking about relationships and change and online dating. I'm thinking about practicing crying as a sort of not just sadness, but also happiness. How to make the two less binary and polarized and more interrelated, giving the sadness context and not just isolating it. I think the more I connect sadness to happiness, the more I will be able to actually appreciate sadness from the deepest part of my existence, in a way. Anyone else wants to fill in any other things I've left out? So red lentils don't actually need to be soaked all that much, just so you know. I'm using red lentils today, and I did soak them for a couple of hours, but you don't actually need to. They cook so fast. Green lentils as well. No, only beans, like bigger beans, like garbanzos, would benefit from soaking overnight. Even black-eyed peas, I feel like with a 4-hour soak you could get away with it. It just depends on the size of the beans. Lentils are so tiny that they can break down very easily during the cooking process. And yeah, it might affect how gassy it makes you. I'm not really knowledgeable enough to speak on that. So that's possible. Probable even. Alright, I'm going to add in some more spices. Some adobo in our rice pot. And smoke and garlic in our lentil pot. Little kind of turmeric based. I'm gonna add some spicy and smoky into our lentil pot too. Turn this down a little bit. Ooh, okay. Maybe a little pizza party. IDK. Just playing. Turning this off. A little bit of coriander. A little bit of cumin. And I'm going to deglaze this pan first because it's a little bit burny right now. No snow here today. No. Okay, we're going to bring those liquids up to a boil, drain our lentils. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with YouTube notifications, guys. Truly have no idea how to make heads or tails of it. So New York did get some snow. I would say we got like less than a foot. It's mostly melted by now. Our temperatures are still kind of wintry, but I wouldn't say they're unbearably cold. We've had a very mild winter, historically speaking. So we've gotten way more rain than we have gotten snow this winter. Welcome to the future, y'all. Hope you enjoy your stay. It's probably way too much lentils, but probably gonna want to add some carrots to this pot too, eventually. Yeah, it's you can't really see the dirt on my floors, honestly, but I'm glad you think I'm clean. That's good. Keep thinking that. The red lentils have been soaking since maybe noon or 1, so 3 hours. I normally don't even bother soaking them if I just want to cook them and I forgot to soak them. Brown rice I should have soaked last night, but I was not thinking. It's probably too sad. Probably too distracted by crying. But yeah, brown rice can benefit a lot from a soak, I find. Takes over half an hour to cook fully, sometimes. That was really interesting that I poured in the chicken stock before I poured in the rice, because that means I don't even get to really measure the liquid that I needed, but I think that's fine. I think that'll be okay. Maybe a little more. We're gonna swap these because the rice is just gonna cook, but the lentils will keep adding to it. Put on a timer for 40 minutes. We should be done by the end of 40 minutes. Don't mind me, just fishing out burnt pieces. I'm so glad I'm not cooking professionally anymore. Alright, some carrots for our lentils. I am meticulous when it comes to thinking, but not at all meticulous when it comes to doing. My meticulousness is the prologue and the epilogue, but never the main story. That is why my life is a mess. Which is fine. I just have to submit to it. Submit to the way of the universe. Yes, lentils are in the legume family. Indeed. Let's add in this piece of really dry ginger. Let's just see what flavor it can still give us. I'm gonna add in these very dry scallions as well. And I'm going to chop in some kale stems. These are pretty young leaves of kale that I got from the farmer's market, so the stems are very edible. Why is your life a total nightmare? That sounds not good. If you want to share, you're more than welcome to. And also no pressure. But I hope your life gets a little better soon. I have been loving just steaming these leafy greens and wrapping cheese in them. I've also started to eat cream cheese, like just globs of cream cheese. I used to think Mom was crazy for doing it, and I was just like, Mom, you're such a dairy freak. And it just felt really weird to eat globs of cream cheese, but that's what she used to do because she loved it so much. And then I just started doing it last week, and you know what? Shit tastes delicious. I'm spending all this money on fancy cheese, but really what I want is just a glob of cream cheese in my mouth sometimes. Mom wins again. Always and forever. Maybe people want to be a mom because I feel like the power of being right is bestowed upon you when you turn into a mother. Like that's your consolation prize for basically signing your entire life away to another human being. Is you get to be right about everything. But that doesn't mean it makes you happy. Sometimes being right makes you sad. Who'll be texting me? Oh, the DSA. Whatever. Whatever. Alright. Back to this. What do you fight with your kids about? I mean, I recall being a kid, so I know what I fought with my mom about. But what do you fight with your kids about? Alright. More greens. More greens. I have been eating veggies this week, but not in a very like cohesive way. I've just been gnawing on carrots. So hopefully I can eat veggies that are actually cooked after I make this lentil happen. And also, I just really wanted the leaves to fit better into that salad container. It's kind of pissing me off that half the leaves were too long to fit into this perfectly, but now they fit. Two birds, one stone. All right, I think that's all the veggies that will fit into this pot today. And we'll stream in some more chicken broth as we go. I like to break down the lentils first into mush. So I like to limit how much water we start off with. And then once it gets mushy, I agitate the pan until we basically like cream the lentils by agitation. And then that's when I add in more water. When you add too much water in the lentils, they tend to retain their shape a lot better. So it just depends on what you want your end product to be. I want mine extra mushy. Hi, San Fran. Tell me a little bit more about what those race discussions are like with your kids. I'm very curious. I've actually been thinking a lot about my like internalized racism from being brought up by two Chinese immigrant parents and their views, which I think are culturally and fear motivated. And obviously it's been a journey growing up in America and attending school with very diverse populations, at least more diverse than populations that my parents have come into contact with. And ever since my mom's passing, I've realized that like, wow, I still hold on to a lot of those thoughts, even though I have a lot of cognitive dissonance regarding the different viewpoints that have been kind of instilled in me by different sources. So I mean, race is an interesting category that we've instilled in society. And I think it's becoming more and more difficult to talk about categories that we've made for ourselves. Race and gender. Because I think the more we talk about it, the more we realize that like they do have actual material consequences now in the way that we've built our systems up, but they're kind of fake, right? So what do we do with battling the inequalities we've built into our world while also acknowledging that like race is kind of not real, and that by talking about race and thinking about race and rebuilding things around labels like race and gender, we're actually perpetuating those continuations of those categories. It's like a catch-22. I don't know anymore. Yeah. Categories, identity, language, PC culture, the weaponization of identity politics too. I mean, we've seen it over and over again, but we've seen it with what's been happening in Palestine. The words being redefined as they become more useful to certain parties. Ideas are not real, but we make them real. And it's at this point my brain is like, you need to stop thinking. I just had a match on Hinge. It's not a match. I didn't accept the match, but I had someone in my inbox lead with, your profile is so cool. Where are you originally from? Now, this is a white dude, but I've had this question asked to me in real life by people from various racial and cultural backgrounds. What's funny is that this time in my profile, I put as my hometown Beijing/Queens. I put both of them as my hometown. So one, this guy did not read my profile, and two, just don't lead with this question, y'all. Don't let that be the first thing that you ask someone. Why? There are so many things. There are so many things you could be asking. Let me see. I don't want to misquote him. That was a paraphrase, but I sent the screenshot to a friend, and let me just see what his actual response was. Okay. His name is Mike. Oh, he didn't say my profile is cool. Sorry. Let me give you the verbatim. Squiggly mark. I don't know why he's leading with a squiggly mark. I like your profile and wanted to say hello. Where are you originally from? There is no punctuation mark until the very end, at which point there is a question mark. Tilde? Is that what that punctuation is called? Tilde? Yeah. I like your profile and wanted to say hello. Where are you originally from, Mike? Could be a bot. I don't know. Could be a bot. Not sure. They asked you, what are you? Like, what did you answer? I feel like that's grounds for a lawsuit. Like, I don't think they're allowed to ask that. Oh my god. Everybody's like, that's not legal. Alright. This is very smushy. Let's give it a taste. And season as we need. Obviously not done cooking. I want the carrots and the greens to break down even more, but now is a good time to check on the flavors. Thank you for sharing your experience interviewing for an internal role at Verizon and NYC. Tell them that you're recording the interview and that what they're doing is illegal and that they should pay you double the price. You can blackmail them on the first interview. How's that? Hello, London. Welcome to 10 p.m. your time and 5 p.m. my time. Definitely needs salt somewhere. Let's do some miso. Let's do some salty condiments, but not salt. Hello, Carissa. Welcome. Yeah, regarding edited videos, I don't know when I'm gonna start doing them again, but I have been thinking about all the video documentation I did after Mom passed away. It's obviously been over 2 years now since she's passed away, and I wasn't expecting to take this long to organize the footage, but I don't know what I should do with that footage anymore. Obviously, I'm at a different stage of grief now. I still do want to turn it into something, though. Just not really sure what anymore. I'm gonna add a little bit of smoked paprika in here. A little bit extra turmeric. What else? What else? Maybe some of this Icelandic kelp that I don't really know what to put it in. So let's put it in there. And a little bit of white pepper. There's red miso, there's that yellow miso, and I think there was like a white miso. There's also hybrid types of all of those three. The red miso, I think, tastes the most different from the other two out of the three main options. I tend to find the red a little bit too dank, potent. It's kind of like thick soy sauce versus loose, new soy sauce. It's a little bit more aged, but I'm not really well versed on miso types to really tell you what the difference is. Grandma has been placed on a new med. I think she was getting a little bit out of hand, and the doctor and the nurses have now added a new pill to her routine, and I don't know if she's just tired of my cooking now, but I don't think her appetite's what it used to be. She's not finishing a lot of the food that I cook for her anymore, even though she keeps saying I'm not bringing her enough. There is that kind of food insecurity aspect to her, probably PTSD from famine days and war days and just being on the run and never having enough of anything in terms of sustenance. She's still very much reading her poetry, her SOS poetry outside every day. Today she was calling out to the blue skies and the white clouds and asking her mom, who I think she is kind of anthropomorphizing into the clouds in the sky, to send her brothers and sisters to come pick her up. And her poetry's getting more advanced. She was calling to the light breeze today to carry her message out to her family. She likes to say that, you know, she's lost control of her body and she didn't anticipate this physical decline, and that, you know, she can't really walk anymore, which honestly I've seen her walk from the bathroom back to her bed with her cane, and girl moves fast, okay? For 96, she's moving. But, you know, in her mind, it's not what she used to be, and I think there is some sort of existential fear on one level of her brain that is peaking, and that's the latest grandma update. Okay. Miso was a good addition. There's a little bit of spice in here. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of wild ramps, a little more aromatic element. And I actually think the kelp works very nicely with the miso because they're both kind of sea flavors. I'll add in a little bit of purple dulse from Maine as well. All the flavor. Yes, miso is very salty. Very, 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 very salty. Okay, our rice is doing good. There's still a little bit of moisture left. I think our lentils are extremely mushy now. Still have a little bit of chicken broth to use, made last month. So we'll add it towards the very end. Let's check the carrots for doneness. That's the thing. Lentils can take on whatever flavor you want to imbue them with. Carrots are not mushy, but they are soft. I would say that's pretty ideal. And I think I might just add a little bit of MSG to really round out that Asian flavor vibe. Turning the heat off, adding in the rest of this broth so that I can use this jar to store our lentils in. We are cream masters, guys. Mush is just a more humble way of saying cream. Yeah, come on over, grab your bowl. Happy to share. Delivery options are currently limited. Oh, the bottom of this rice is getting scorched. So I will turn it off. Scorched. Woo. And just burn myself with steam water. That's cool. That's great. Saw every bit of that coming my way. You can't get over the earthy taste of lentils. Oh, that's my favorite part. My favorite congee toppings are... I kind of just like plain congee, but I like salted duck egg and cilantro. Sometimes I could be in the mood for a little bit of a pork floss action. Wow, I didn't even use all the scallions. How did that escape me? Time to throw it in now. Sliced beets? Interesting. I like sliced beets. I like pickled beets more though. I think we're done cooking, y'all. I think this might be it for me for today. I'm just gonna put it all away in that jar. I need it over the next 2.5 days. Satisfactory? I don't go clubbing. Do I look like I go clubbing? Oh, let me share some of my notes. I was the intro to your last sermon? Do tell me more. Oh my gosh, was I the prodigal son? Sometimes I feel like it. I'm gonna share some of my notes on living as an autistic person in this world after I wash this cutting board. With the hair up, I look like I go clubbing. Okay, noted. Noted. Oh, I'm not offended at all. I'm always curious what people think about me. Okay, so I've learned that apparently, first of all, I'm not diagnosing myself, but I am diagnosing myself just internally, you know, but apparently autistic folks can be very, like self-centered, self-focused, egocentric, one might say, which is something that I've been using to describe myself in the past half year. It's very fascinating. I don't know much about autism yet, but I'm learning. So my friend Daisuke talked to me for almost 2 hours, explaining to me how autistic folks might think and behave, and how that might rub up against non-autistic folks' experience of the world and the way that they operate. And he was saying how repression is a minefield, and non-autistic folks kind of keep it buried and they step around it to not trigger the minds from exploding. But for autistic minds, very little is buried, because we're used to stabilizing our egos without repression. And we also, in the same fell swoop, assume that other people, non-autistic people, don't have minefields because we don't feel like we have a lot of minefields. So that's what leads to the more no filter kind of behaviors, because autistic folks tend to be less concerned or not concerned about these minds. And we don't think it's a big deal to go around stepping on the minefield and triggering all these minds, because they don't feel like minds to us. And we assume that it's not a big deal for others, so we keep stepping on other people's minds, and then other people are just like continually triggered by the way that we behave, because they like to step around the minds of this repression field. And so he was saying for a lot of like non-autistic folks, a lot of considerations and effort go into this way of tiptoeing around others' minefields, because they have these minefields. In a lot of ways, the autistic mind is a logic machine, and it kind of rubs up on the irrational side of us, which can't really be defined because it's ever changing, the parts of yourself that is never stabilized. And so he said that the key is to see the autism patterns to control the situation better when dealing with other folks. And he also said that the self is never independent of the medium, meaning that the self that I perform shifts based on where I am. So the self that I present to you here on these lives versus the self that I present on my Instagram versus the self that I present in real life and across different social settings and contexts and friend groups in real life. So he said that, you know, like the more extreme side of autistic folks might be termed as defenders of reason, that there's a very clear black and white of right and wrong, and that when you are seeing the world in that very black and white, right and wrong, binary, polarity, whatever you want to call it, paradigm, you tend to impose your right onto other people because you don't want to be wrong. You're a logic machine. You're a defender of reason, and you can't really stand to see reason go out the window. So in imposing your right onto other people, they may get offended. They may view you as like pushy or self-righteous. But he also said, Daisuke said that, you know, if there is one logical answer, the way autistic minds tend to think, you also realize that if you become that logic, of which there is only one logical answer to follow, then you're not you. You are just logic. And so how to kind of navigate this prioritization of logic without completely identifying with it and repelling other people away by your prioritization of logic. So the assumption for me is that my thinking is me, but I am more than just my thinking, even though the autistic mind tends to prioritize thinking because autistic people think that solving a problem is done through thinking. But thinking, he says, sometimes creates problems, which I have found to be very true, especially in human relationships, which are irrational most times. So in thinking that my thinking is me, that's a reflex identity that comes out of prioritizing logic. And it puts me out of touch with maybe other aspects of my existence, like feeling and body and mood. So he said, don't bother trying to be consistent because there's always contradictions in life. And, you know, no choice is any better or more correct than other choices, because unfairness just comes with life, and especially being a minority of any type in life, you will come up against unfairness. And so if you hold on to this sense of unfairness and you try to make everything fair, sooner or later you'll realize that in this world, that way of operating doesn't serve you, right? Because the world just isn't fair. So if it doesn't serve you, then why do you continue doing it, is what he asked me. Because when you insist on making unfair things fair, it tends to breed resentment. Resentment against the ever-occurring unfairness of life. And thinking more deeply into that, do we actually want fairness? Because if we establish fairness, then there is only one reality. There is only one logic, going back to that black and white way of thinking of good and bad, fair and unfair. If we want fairness to be a part of our world, we will soon just become pure logic, and we won't really be us anymore. There will be no diversity. So that was the kind of internal contradiction of our world. And realizing that we have all these ideals that we think we want, but in reality, do we actually want them to be our existence? So the last point that he illuminated for me is that neurotypicals, non-autistic folks, actually prioritize emotions. They think they prioritize logic and rationality, but they prioritize emotions, which is why they tend to tiptoe around perceived minefields of repression and other people's feelings. And autistic folks actually prioritize rational logic. And I said, but if that's the case, then why do I have such a hard time controlling my emotions sometimes? I remember in college was the first time that I started crying involuntarily and was extremely embarrassed because one person, a friend, or someone like not mean at all, just said something, 1 or 2 sentences, that like kind of had to deal with my behavior. And I read it as a criticism of some sort or an evaluation and a judgment of me. And I just immediately started tearing up. And then in tearing up and realizing that I had no control over whether or not I was crying at this point, I started crying more because I felt out of control and extremely embarrassed. So I was like, if I'm autistic and I'm actually prioritizing rational logic, why am I crying over these possibly true evaluations of me? And he said that it's because you prioritize rational logic that the emotionality of that reaction rubbed up against what you thought you should be doing. And so in that moment of crying, you felt shame when you were overtaken by emotion. And you felt shame because all of a sudden emotion overrided rational logic. And I think that was like the first time in my entire life that it finally made sense to me why I have just such a low threshold for crying as a response. And again, this kind of like drove home the point that I've been kind of digging into this entire past year regarding every aspect of my mental health, which is the role that shame plays in my life. The role that shame plays in the way that I perceive the world and myself and my place in this world, and how it motivates me to do certain things, and how it causes rumination, and how it doesn't let me move beyond my perceived past mistakes. And it kind of glues me into this identity of who I am. And I think what I've been taking away from my actual therapy lessons and this talk with Daisuke and my Instagram memes is that shame is really hurtful to myself. Like, I think that it's a teacher and a guideline of my morality, but if I let it sink into me, I get paralyzed by its grip. And also, the other main theme that I've been learning this year is that the self has to change. You have to allow it to change. It may feel uncomfortable and painful and not right and scary, but freedom exists in letting go of the concept of the self. And freedom exists in realizing that the self is never independent of the medium. And freedom exists in contradiction and allowing contradiction to be present. And maybe freedom exists outside of thought. Maybe thought is my ultimate prison. And it's funny because I think it's the way that I think that has attracted a lot of viewers and readers and people who are interested in how my mind works. But it is also this very trait that has caused me a lot of physical pain, mental pain, spiritual pain, and also a lot of real life relationship problems and conflicts. And I'm just saying that I'm starting to realize all of this. I'm not saying I can change immediately all of this. I'm not saying I can change ever all of this either, because maybe a part of it is just part of myself now. Because I'm 34, I'm not a child, and I'm not that easy to change. But it helps to be cognizant, I think, of all of these factors. Of what goes into my actions and thoughts and identity. And I've been doing a lot of like crazy habits that maybe single people who live on their own eventually do anyway, but I'll normalize it starting now. I've been talking to myself more, sometimes staring at myself in the mirror, sometimes imagining parts work, imagining that I am coaching my inner child, that I am my best friend, and that I am speaking to my best friend and giving her advice, that I am trying to not only calm the more agitated or broken or sad or depressed part of myself, but also trying to say, hey girl, like, you're doing a lot. It's okay to not always get it right. It's cool that you're taking time for yourself to sit with all of these feelings and think about them, but don't think too hard and don't blame yourself for whatever happens or happened or will happen, whatever your fears might be. Like, it's all normal. And don't let these normal moments that may be unpleasant hold you down and continue to shame and guilt you. And it's cool to not think sometimes. It's cool to just feel sometimes, or it's cool to just lie down sometimes, and it's cool to take a nap if your body's really struggling. And it's cool if you just want to watch a TV show, or if you want to read, or if you don't want to read, or if you want to eat and you don't want to eat. I think a lot of this past year and a half of living on my own post getting fired has been discovering who I am outside of the framework of being a full-time worker, who I am outside of the framework of being an only child and a daughter. It's been navigating what it means to be a caretaker of my grandmother. It's been a lot of negotiating with guilt and shame, ongoing. I think the more I learn about myself, the more opportunities there are for me to meet new guilts and new shames. And I think what really is necessary for me right now, as I continue to find all of these new guilts and new shames, is to learn techniques and sustainable practices for holding my own hand through it all. Because it's kind of like when you are working in theater or you're a dancer, the first thing they teach you is how to fall. You know, learning your body and learning the parts that are safer to take the blow, and which parts you should prioritize shielding and protecting. These are necessary techniques because falls will be a part of the lifestyle. And so if I realize that the more of myself that I learn about, the more I will find new guilts and new shames, then I need to know how to digest and meet and greet and accept and incorporate these guilts and shames. I think they are valid feelings. All of them are valid feelings. They are here for a reason. But it's important to keep in mind that we all have multiple selves within us, and it's cool if they don't agree all the time. The self is never independent of the medium. So let yourself, in the words of Bruce Lee, be like water. Let the water become the medium. Because sometimes resistance will just burn you out, especially if it's against yourself. It's okay if I think I'm a bad person. It's okay if I think I did a wrong thing or a stupid thing. It's cool that I can recognize that I'm judging myself for it, because that already means I have multiple selves within me. That I have a self that's doing this thing that the other self considers to be wrong or to be stupid or silly or embarrassing. And that just means that I have to honor both of them. That I can't be negligent of either self or any self, because once I do that, that's how repression happens, and that's how guilt and shame begins to feed on all the selves that exist inside. Because repression is self-administered oppression, and both of those are very nice environments for hate to breed in. So I continue to learn from all of my friends and all of my experiences, all of my doings and wrongdoings, because wrongdoings are a necessary part of ingredients to formulate a final product that will never be finalized. And that's maybe the coolest part about it, that it won't ever be finalized. I guess that could be what makes life worth living the most. I said a couple of lives ago maybe that I've been observing myself cry. In a way, maybe the way that I can learn to live out the rest of my life is to observe myself move through all these different situations. If I can be an observer of myself, that also confirms that I have multiple selves within me. The one that is doing the doing, and the one that is doing the observing. And you are your own documentary of sorts. And you're just watching this movie and this story unfold as it happens. It's like lucid dreaming in a lot of ways. It's both real and not real. And I'll work towards letting this lucid dream of an existence become less scary in my perception and more intriguing. And hopefully find some adventure in that. And that's my privilege for having the luxuries to still exist with all the comforts that I have. Okay, that's all, I guess. See y'all next time. Vitamins, sleep, water, and don't be too hard on yourself, please. Take care.